keeping with our theme from our last video on the Alekhine, this is again a variation that I'm seeing quite a lot with this early bishop c4. And as I mentioned in the last video, we have two different options here. Like the more aggressive, I would say, Bortnick setup, and then the more solid setup that I typically go for. So Bortnick's choice would be knight b6, and you got this urge to play c5, but we're going to end up in some sort of weird Sicilian there. I strongly prefer knight c6, as we have options in the future to go after the bishop in the open position with either knight d4 or knight a5, where the main line follows knight f3, and already Black has a very solid position with full equality, and White's making natural moves, but there's no immediate path to really try to attack or punish us in any way, and already playing to get the bishop in the open position. So this is kind of Zero's position that I like to see when analyzing. But back to the main game and what I chose to play, c6. And in the previous video, I talked about this position and the plan to directly go to an endgame here. And normally, this is the line that I'll see. Queen g3, we give chase and also keep an eye on the c2 pawn. And normally after castles, you can get a little bit sketchy and try to grab it, can you? And then queen takes g3. And we're going to get a style of game that you see from the main game. Well, understanding tension is key, and what is the most aggressive move? Queen g3 is definitely far superior to what my opponent played in the game, which is queen takes f6. And White really should go for castle's kingside here. Optimal development of the bishop, when you can place it on d6 and have the more aggressive square, you should. a3, castles, and after bishop g5, we're going to see this thematic tempo development with b5 to eventually get our c8 bishop into the game, maybe playing for a c5 break, for instance. So bishop d2, and now let's begin to slow it down a bit and say, all right, what is the best path forward in this blitz game where I'm playing against someone who is a few points shy of 2,500? Well, I've got my solid position. What does the last move of White tell you that he's planning here? Well, he wants to go queenside. All right. Looking for b5 at the right opportunity. If I go b5 too quick here, he is likely going to go the route he should go, which is castling kingside. So I elect for bishop e7. And just as a point of preference here, more than likely bishop d6 is the more accurate move. But I know it's solid, and I want to give the image that, oh, I'm just developing. Yeah, nothing to see here. As soon as White castles, though, even though this is an endgame, no queens, it still has middle game flair to it. And we can ask the question and apply it here. What is the most aggressive move? What is the most forcing move? And it's back to the theme that we've seen in previous variations, b5. And after bishop b3, it's asking that question again. What is the most forcing aggressive move? a5. So what's the plan? Love to just continue to gain space. So a4, you're trying to stop me. All right. Now what's the best way to handle this tension moving forward? If I take, that seems to get White out of the bind and break my pawn structure. If I leave the tension, I'm likely going to lose the pawn, so push and gain time. White really doesn't have a good square for the knight, so trade. Well, this now fixes my pawn structure. Now I'm right at home after writing a couple of books on the French defense. I'm like, nice French pawn structure. Got some space on the queen side, and I've got a path to get rid of my bad bishop. Happy as I can be. My opponent goes knight g3. I say to myself, well, I don't see any potential of an attack for white. It's going to take many, many moves before I have anything to worry about over there. So let's go ahead and get developed. So castle. I could have continued to ask the question, what is the most aggressive move here, and go for knight g4, but I think this is more of a matter of taste. I see that I'm getting behind in development. White is completely developed and ready to go. Personal preference again, I would rather consolidate. So I'm going to castle, and after h3, bishop a6, looking for the right moment for this bishop to potentially come to c4 and trade off for its counterpart and look to weaken that kingside structure. f4, say, all right, so what's the plan with f4? You want f5 in order to break up my pawns and have targets. Well, I can't allow that. So, what's the process for coming up with the best move in the position? I understand what white wants to do. So, prophylaxis, how can I stop it? So, we have a problem, solve the problem. What is the best way to solve said problem? So, two candidate moves come to mind. g6, trying to cement control over f5, or the more aggressive bishop d6, which places a pawn in a pin in order to bother that knight. Which one's better? Most of the time you don't even have to come up with Kautov's thinking process using 3 different candidate moves and comparisons. Bishop d6, sometimes 2 will do just fine. Bishop d6 is definitely the most annoying move in the position, which is one of the questions that I typically ask when I have time to think. If I can't find the best move, I try to find the most annoying one, and stopping the opponent's plan, it is annoying. Rook he1. Now we've got 2 rooks. Where are rooks designed to be? What do they want to do? They want to be on open files. Which one is better here? Honestly, you're probably doubling up anyway, so it doesn't matter too much, but I prefer rook f to c8 just because the other rook's already on the side of the board where we're going to be attacking and pressing. So this looks good. And though material is balanced here, this is already a struggle for my opponent. Is where's the plan? Where's any aggression? This is a wait and sit position for white because there's just nothing really to do. When you have your opponent in the bind, don't let him out of it. Slowly improve to the maximum before completing your idea. My opponent goes bishop e3. Okay, bishop c4. And taking either way really has its merits here, but I like the idea of having control over the open c file. So b3, place the rook on a light square, not a dark square, so it's not in the way of my bishop and not a target for my opponent's bishop, potentially to gain a tempo in the future. Little things. King b2. Now we've optimized the rooks. Rook d2. So we've established one weakness. So what are you supposed to do next? The whole Capablanca principle of 2 weaknesses. Let's create a second one. And where could we get an advantage here? So this plan is going to eventually win the game for me. Queenside is locked. Yes? Yes. Can we do anything over there to add pressure to, say, the c2 pawn to win it? No. White's just going to do complete passive defense and cross their fingers that they can hope and pray for a draw. Can we play in the center? No. Center is locked. So where should we be playing? Kingside. How? Let's make our bishop stronger, our opponent's bishop weaker, and go after a potential weakness. So I start off g6, taking away key squares, and getting ready to launch the pawn. So the plan that I was already considering here was g6, followed by h5, followed by h4 to bother this knight. And once this knight moves, I'm going to get this fantastic e4 square. And if he's played a move like rook e2, very likely this pawn is going to fall at some point. If not, I can maneuver around and bother the f pawn. But I am definitely making progress with this type of idea. He goes rook e to e2, which now after h5, it's even stronger because that's likely where the knight wanted to go. And my opponent blunders and his position falls all apart as h4 is played. Now, what's the best way to continue? He did stop one plan, but he didn't. He now gave me a new avenue of attack. Knight g4, bothering that bishop. And my opponent is realizing at this point that you cannot hold material, and had a bit of a moment because there's no good moves. And this happens especially in fast time controls like we were playing. f5 was played, and again, we asked the question, what is most a forcing and aggressive move for black? And hopefully, when you found bishop d6 earlier, you were waiting for this opportunity. As I was in the game, I grabbed that knight, and my opponent had had enough. So hopefully you enjoyed this quick, clean, easy video on the Alekhine, and maybe you see the sidelines are nothing to worry about at all. You can get these playable fighting games. Have a good one.